Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Gerst. I've been hiring and mentoring executives, frontline employees, and job seekers for nearly 40 years through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions, big and small. It also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big job change. We all know transitions can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have actionable strategies and proven tactics to achieve the future you want. We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to your next great job. So if change is on your horizon, you won't want to miss this discussion. Also, please subscribe to this podcast so you won't miss any future episodes. Debra Boggs, thank you so much for being with us on People in Transition. I've really been looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Debra, one of my signature questions that I ask each of my guests is, what was it that you thought you wanted to be someday when you were a young child, when you grew up?
Yeah, thanks so much, Bob. It's interesting. I was thinking about this question because I went through a lot of different things, I think. I went through a lot of different options, and I was trying to think back to the earliest thing that I wanted to be. And the first thing I can remember, and this is going to sound random, is an antique store owner.
So what were the transition moments that you have gone through in your career from that time when you've wanted to be an antique store owner to where you're at today?
Yeah, I went through a lot of transitions, and I'm excited to talk about this because I think it really ties into this idea of career management that I think we're going to talk about in a little bit. But, when I started my career, I'm from Northern Indiana. I went to college in my hometown. I stayed in my hometown. I actually married really early, still married. We joke that a lot of people probably lost money betting on how long we'd stay married based on when we got married. But anyway, and so I finished college, and it was a bad economic time, and I was fortunate enough to have been in an internship, so I stayed in that job. And then I ended up getting a couple of opportunities, moved around, but I was kind of lost at really what I wanted to do, right? I was doing good work and I enjoyed my employers, but I wasn't really doing work that was fulfilling to me. And then an opportunity came open at a university. I was working at the university and they needed a director of career services. And that was something that really excited me. That was something I was really interested in doing because I've always been interested in the employment landscape and the relationship between employers and employees and things like that. So I got that opportunity. I had an amazing boss at the time who actually sponsored me to take that role and leave his department and move to do a job that was really exciting for me. And I loved it. And so that was the first real transition period, kind of that first shot I got in my career. And from that point, the next real big change, I would say, in my career is after I left that role, I found that during that time, what I really, really loved was helping job seekers get ready for their job search, really helping them get excited about their search, get the confidence to go for roles they may not have thought they were eligible for, go for things they didn't think were possible. And so I kept doing resume writing on the side for friends and things like that because it was really more of a passion project. So that's transition number one. Transition number two was starting my resume writing business, which has transitioned into a lot of things, grown and scaled into different things. But it primarily started as a resume writing business, and it was an accident. I didn't actually mean to set out to start a business. But because this was a passion project of mine, I really enjoyed it, and I decided to try to get some resume writing work on Upwork freelancing platform. And it didn't go well. And I wasn't getting any traction. No one wanted to hire a random person to write their resume, and I wasn't getting any traction at all. And I almost gave up. And I got a project from actually a runway model in London. And that was my very first project that at the cusp of giving up gave me the momentum to keep moving and has turned into what it is today.
Today, we're going to talk a little bit more about executive level recruiting and transition. What I'd like, Debra, from you is to describe how the executive job search is different than searches at other levels.
Yeah, absolutely. So my firm really focuses on the executive job search because it is different. And the executive experience as you go through the job search is different than at any other level. And so the way you go to market and the way you show up needs to be different. And so that's why our firm actually hyper focuses in VP to board level leaders because their experience and what they need from the job search process is different. There's a couple of reasons for that. Number one is there are very limited spots. A company may have 20 or more marketing team members on their team, but they only have one chief marketing officer. So the opportunities at the VP and C level are much fewer than they are for all of the other levels of employees, right? And so you have to show up differently to really compete for those roles. And the other reason is if you're going to compete for those roles, every other chief marketing officer is going to have really deep experience as well. So you can't just rely on your accomplishments or being a high performer, because that's what got you to the VP or C-suite. But now you have to bring more to the table because having a strong resume and a strong background is table stakes, right? That's what you have to even be considered for the job. And then what else do you bring? And that's being a cultural fit, having enthusiasm and deep understanding of the work in the business, the executive presence piece. All of those things become much more important competing at that level.
In your experience, how long might an executive position take in their job transition?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's a question I get from clients every day, right? How long is my job search going to take? And the answer is it depends, but I'll tell you what I typically walk people through. Could you get a job next week? Probably. We can probably get you a job next week. But is it the right job at the right compensation with the right company? Probably not. And so when you get to the executive level, for as much runway as you may have, some people may be looking for a job and they're currently working. A lot of our clients are just looking for the next best thing, or they want to make a change for whatever reason. Some are leaving their roles and they need to find something a little quicker, right? So there's that balance between the runway and ability you have to wait for the right thing, or you've earned the right to be picky and you can wait until the perfect thing comes across your desk. Regardless, I would say plan for at least 6 months at the executive level if you have the luxury of time, because even just the interview process can take a long time. And one thing I would caution, especially executive leaders, is sometimes they get into interview processes that can be drawn out for months, but they're going really well. They're feeling really positive about it. They stop their search. And then at the last minute, for whatever reason, they don't get the offer. And now they've put themselves back quite a ways. So short answer to your question, plan for 6 months, could be shorter, could be longer. It kind of depends on people's priorities.
So when you coach potential clients and you say, here's the first step that you should take, what do you tell them to do?
This is such a great question. And if I could put this on a billboard, I would, because a lot of people call us at the time when they want to start their search and they say, I want a resume. Okay, that's great. But there's a step before that, and especially at the executive level. And that step is getting clear on your goals. When you've reached the executive level or you've reached this VP or senior leadership level, you can probably do a lot of different things. And you probably have done a lot of different things, maybe different industries, held different functions. I mean, like you mentioned earlier in my career, I have done a lot of different things because I couldn't find my path, right? And so you can't put a resume together or plan your job search strategy, your personal go-to-market strategy, or prepare your LinkedIn profile to try to be all things to all people, because it's going to be overwhelming and no one will understand where you're the perfect fit. So first, I always say, let's get clear on the goals. And that means, what does your ideal role look like? What type of function do you want to lead? What kind of a company, industry? What are you targeting? It doesn't mean that you can't have a couple of options, but you need to get really clear picture of what a successful job search is going to look like for you, because understanding all of that will allow you to hyper-focus your documents, messaging, your accomplishments, and your value, who you're going to reach out to in your networking process. All of that hinges on understanding where you're headed.
Debra, can you share some strategies or tips for a candidate so that they can stand out in what is a competitive job market, particularly when we're talking about, again, these high-level roles?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things I would say, and it kind of goes back to having to be the whole package, but it's interesting because I see a lot of people want to work on their resume and want to make sure the resume is perfect. Every word in it is perfect. And I'm not saying that's not important. I started, this business as a resume writer, so it's certainly important. But I see a lot of people ignore LinkedIn or not understand the importance of their LinkedIn profile, and not just the content, but I tell my clients, LinkedIn is going to be more important than your resume at the executive level in that search. And you want to think about it with three lenses. And this is how we do for our clients as well. Is it's not just the content positioning you for the roles you're looking for, which we certainly need to do and you need to have done well, but it's the optimization to make sure you show up in all potential searches. You're easy to find. If recruiters are looking for people like you show up in those things. There's a lot you can do from the back end and keyword optimization to make that happen. And then the third thing is that executive presence in the profile visually, right? So you need to have a really great headshot, a professionally done headshot that looks like you do today, that looks like you would walk into an interview. You need to have a background image. You need to have a featured section and links and images throughout the profile to show that it's not just an online resume, right? It needs to be a visual presentation of you as a leader and give anyone all the information they would need about how you might fit into their role for them to then call you. So that's number one, is really focusing and spending a lot of time on that LinkedIn profile, making sure it's really on point. And I know, and when I speak a lot on this, and it seems in the weeds, but it actually is really, really important, because I tell my clients, most people are going to see you through your LinkedIn profile first. And so it's going to be your only opportunity to make a strong first impression. And we can't change a first impression. So what is that LinkedIn profile saying about us in our headshot and our visual presentation and the content it's providing? So that's really a vital number one step.
So what I'm hearing you say is that in today's kind of digital age, that it's significant, the appropriate use of technology and social media, even for executive level job searches. Is that correct?
Absolutely, Bob. Think about it as your executive visibility. A lot of the executives I talk to have built really amazing careers through their personal network at work, getting promoted, getting recruited just because of the people they know in the industry. And they've grown to a level where they've had a great career, and now they find themselves needing to go to market for the first time. They're needing to do an actual job search for the first time. And at that level, it's different. And a lot of times, because they've built this great career, they haven't needed to leverage those tools and that technology and tell their story and understand their messaging. They just haven't needed to do that. And so now, they don't understand the importance of it, or they don't use it, so they don't realize hundreds of millions of other people do use it actively. And so it's a blind spot that gets missed. And then I find that individuals having to really play catch up, remember all the people that they wanted to reconnect with and rebuild old relationships and things like that. So that's one piece that I think we don't think about, that executive visibility, until we need it. And then we find out that we're invisible.
So that leads us to a discussion regarding networking. And I'm sure you have a number of thoughts in terms of that, because sometimes more senior people have only really established themselves within their company and the network that they make within that company, which are important. And I'm not downplaying that at all, but they did that at the expense maybe of those external networks. How do you coach your clients in terms of developing effective network techniques?
That's such a great question. And it's something that came up with a client the other day, had a 30-year career with a Fortune 500, really amazing career. She grew to the C-level, but now that she's looking outside for the first time, she finds that she has a deep network inside the company, but not much of a network at all outside the company, even within her own industry. So I suggest doing a few things. And again, it goes back to look at, your clear focus, right? What is that ideal role? Who are the people that you're going to need to meet to make in inroad with those ideal roles, and where are they at, right? So are they at specific conferences? And even, we think about going to conferences as part of our jobs, right? But this is more of owning your career, managing your career, and taking on the expense to go to these conferences on your own to then build your network, right? Meeting people in person, meeting people in professional organizations, things like that. And then think about, if you're looking to move into a new company, maybe within your industry, think about your vendors, right? Because your vendors you've been working with all this time probably know other people in your industry because they're a vendor for your industry. So reaching out to them, especially if you've left your role, it doesn't make it as awkward as if you're still in this role asking a vendor for advice on where you should go. But, establishing those relationships and then finding out where are they going to meet people in the industry. But it's really around owning your career trajectory in terms of investing the time and the money into going where your audience is and building those relationships in person.
Debra, what are some of the common mistakes or misconceptions that job seekers have when they're searching for an executive level position?
Yeah, there's two. This is a really great question, and I see it all the time. A lot of times I will, an executive will come to me and say, I've been searching for 6 months. I just can't get anywhere. I'm not landing interviews. And the first thing I ask is, okay, how are you going about your job search? What does your job search strategy look like? And they've been applying online, and they've been checking job boards, and they've been checking LinkedIn jobs, and they've been seeing jobs pop up and they'll apply, but there's not many jobs. And that is the number one mistake I see executives make, is job searching like everyone else job searches. Because again, the executive search is different. And so online applications are not a recipe for success for executive level job seekers for a few reasons. One of the main reasons is that most executive jobs are not filled through online applications. And so there are very few job postings out there for those executive level jobs. And if there are, they're getting hundreds of applicants that all have really high accomplishments and high performance. And then, you're in a list of 200 other people. So that's the first mistake I often see, is stop applying online. It feels good because it's something tangible, it's actionable, you feel like you're making progress, but it's really just a recipe for getting rejection after rejection after rejection. And that's not helping anyone's ego in the middle of a job search. And at the executive level, you need to have a little bit of an ego to land those jobs. So this is not helpful for anyone's self-esteem. The other mistake I see is people not understanding how to work with executive recruiters and what recruiters actually do. So, we could have a whole separate hour-long conversation on this, but the point is, a lot of executives will say, well, I'm trying to find a recruiter to help me get a job, but I'm not getting any responses. But the confusion is how an executive recruiter works. And the way that they work is they're being paid by a company to fill a role with candidates that meet very specific criteria set by the company. And so when this happens, this means that only very specific candidates are going to be attractive to recruiters because of the way that they work, the way that they're paid, who's paying them. And they're not necessarily taking candidates and shopping them around to companies. That's not how this works. And so if you're an executive candidate looking for an apples to apples job, you're currently working or you've just recently left, things like that, then you may be a really good candidate for recruiters. If you're looking to make a big career shift, or you've been off for a while, or you're looking to move industries, that's not going to be the best channel for you for your job search, and it's going to add to your pile of rejections. Just think about how, the way that recruiters work, I always say, it's like they have to fill a round hole with a round peg. And if you're kind of outside of that, then you need to think about other channels like networking.
But would you say a candidate should at least inform a search firm that they're out looking, and that's one of the contacts that candidate should make certain that they are establishing to help them through the search?
Yes, absolutely. Recruiters are an amazing resource for executive job seekers. This is not a bash on recruiters, especially all of my friends out there. Sorry, guys. What I mean is that if you're really looking outside the box, or you think a recruiter is going to do the job search for you, that's the mistake I see. If you're looking for something similar to what you're currently in, then a recruiter can be an absolutely great resource, and could be the main channel you use for your job search. And reaching out to recruiters is really important. The one thing I would say is, when you do that, it goes back to getting clear on your focus. The mistake I see sometimes is sending an email out saying, somebody did it just today, actually, I saw it come across my feed, saying, I'm looking for a new role. Let me know if any openings would fit my background. That's too wide, right? We need to tell a recruiter exactly what we're looking for and the boxes that we fit in, right? They need to know, okay, you're looking for a job in this industry doing this, and make it really clear and short and concise. We want to give them enough information that they can be helpful. We don't want to give them so much information that we overwhelm them with details, or are expecting them to look in our resume and see if we fit anything they have open.
Debra, you see lots of people who are in transition and work with many of them. And one of the things that I've noticed is that they tend to compare themselves to where others are at. Bob is sending out more resumes, or Bob gets more networking opportunities, or Bob gets more interviews, or Bob seems to be doing this faster than I am, and so forth. And what I believe that does is create a no-win situation for that individual, and causes them to be even more negative in their emotions than what they are to begin with. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think, it's interesting because we all put our wins out there, especially on social media, things like that. We're all talking about the things that we are great at, or celebrations, but we're not putting the struggle out there, right? Of, okay, how many interviews did Bob get, but how many rejections did Bob get? How many people ignored Bob's first networking message? Things like that. And the other thing is, Bob may be in a different area area, in a different point in his career where you may have more of an established network where maybe I'm still just building my network because I have an all internal network, things like that. So I always caution people from comparing themselves to others because number one, you don't have the whole story. You don't have all of the information to know, okay, am I actually an exact peer and replica of Bob, and should I be having the same experience? And the other thing is we don't know the priorities, right? And I see it a lot when it's, oh, well, so-and-so landed a job faster. Okay, well, did so-and-so land that job at the right company, at the right compensation, doing the work that they want to do? Or did they sacrifice one of those areas to take something because they needed to go to work right away? So you never know the whole story someone's working through, and all you can control is your own go-to-market strategy and keeping the ball moving forward for your own search.
A great career coach once told me that people that land jobs are persistent and consistent. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, that is such a great point. Definitely persistent. I think about that first opportunity when I moved into career services. I did not have a background in that. And I joke now today that I annoyed them into submission to give me that opportunity. I would hang out around the office door of the hiring manager until she came back from meetings. And I was persistent in my interest in the role because I wanted there to be no confusion, right? That I wanted that job. I was enthusiastic about it. And I think that, and then the consistency piece is so important because kind of like with the network, you need to consistently be building your network because you never know when you're going to need to activate it, right? You need to consistently be reaching out to companies to secure more interviews, even if you're really far along in an interview process and you think you're going to get the offer. At the end of the day, if you get the offer, we don't know what that offer looks like yet, and you may get lowballed and you may end up having to turn it down. So I think that consistency to keep the ball moving forward and persistence in showing your enthusiasm and not giving up.
Debra, what does an interview should be a two-way street mean to you, and why do you think you should use this approach?
Absolutely. It's interesting. I have LinkedIn Friday Fun questions every week, and this week was actually about red flags that come up in an interview from the candidate's perspective, which has brought some really interesting stories to light today. But especially at the executive level, every move you make is really important. It's hard if you land in a bad role, it's harder to get back out and get another job at that same level with that compensation and things like that. Again, for all the reasons we've already talked about. And so making sure that you're making a good decision with the company that you're going to connect with is important and kind of hard. And so I always tell my candidates to make sure that you are interviewing the company, right? Making sure that you are in alignment with the CEO. So if you're, a C-level or VP that's reporting up, make sure that you're in alignment with the leadership because you're going to be very close with the leadership and you want to make sure that where they're headed, you agree with. You want to make sure that you're in a moral alignment. You have values that align because I see a lot of issues where, a candidate will take a role and then find out that they're not in value alignment with the company. And that's an issue and they end up having to leave. And so I think, questions around company mission, vision, understanding where the leadership is headed, what their priorities are for the next year, asking questions like what a successful first year would look like to understand, are their goals attainable? Asking questions about, why the last person left, or if it's a new role, and this is a big one I see a lot, making sure that they really are ready for what you bring to the table. A lot of times C-level candidates that we work with will take a role at, say, a startup or a company that they're building a new role and they want something or they want a big change. They want someone to really transform the company. But then when they start, they realize that company doesn't really want transformed, or they really don't want that change that they just hired on. And so I think really asking a lot of questions about what a successful future looks like will help garner whether they're actually interested in making that change or not.
Do you ever coach your clients, Debra, to ask for the job when the interview is done?
Yeah, it's so funny. I just had a client say that to me the other day. She's a chief marketing officer. And she said, one of my friends who's in sales really said I need to be asking for the job at the end of the interviews. What should I do? That seems very salesy. And my response to her was, for a sales leader, I would absolutely say ask for the job. For someone in another function, that seems like a really bold question to ask and can feel maybe a little smarmy to some people. And in that case, I say what you can do at the end of an interview is re-communicate your enthusiasm for the job so they know that you want it. question I like to advise my clients to ask is there anything in my background or candidacy that gives you pause that I can expand on? Because that gives you an opportunity to address any issues they may be having, to reestablish your enthusiasm, but it's not necessarily that direct question of, I want the job, can I start tomorrow? Because the job search doesn't necessarily work like that. So I think as long as they know you want it, that's more important.
Debra, is a search for a senior level position by a woman or a person of color somehow different? And if it is different, what are the action plans that you coach them to implement so that they can find that next great opportunity?
This is such an important question. And it's interesting. For women specifically, the mistake I see a lot of women make, even at the highest levels of their career, is downplaying their accomplishments when they're interviewing, when they're writing their resume, preparing their LinkedIn profile. They don't want to brag, right? And this is a generalization, but it's what I see more often than not. And what I tell my clients that are, like I said, specifically women, this can also include women of color, is that, when you are downplaying your accomplishments, you're doing yourself a disservice in the job search because your competition isn't doing that. And so you're immediately putting yourself 2 steps behind the competition when really you bring the same level of expertise. And so while you're trying not to brag, you're really holding yourself back from getting that offer because your competition is not concerned about that. So that's the number one thing I see happen a lot. The other piece I see happen a lot is getting stuck in the weeds on whether they have all the qualifications or not. Do they really fit everything that the company's looking for, or being I don't want to say too honest about their gaps in qualifications, but more forthright about the areas that they don't bring to the table and areas they would need to learn versus the areas that they've really got handled well. And so that's one other thing I try to coach people on not doing. And so those are the couple of things I see more often.
So you would coach someone, even if you don't have 100% of what's on the job description, that they still may want to pursue that opportunity.
Absolutely, because I always tell people, think about all of the jobs you've ever held and how closely your job actually related to the job description, right? We can all think about all the job descriptions we've ever had, and do we actually ever do 100% of those, or how many things we do that are outside of that job description? They may not have updated it since the 90s, right? We don't know. And so don't get hung up on that. Really, instead, focus on the value that you bring to what the company is trying to do. And you figure that out through the interview process, right? The interview process, you can actually ask a hiring manager or the leader or the CEO, what is your vision for the future? What does success look like? What are you looking for in a successful candidate? And then match your expertise to that work and your accomplishments, and your value to what they're looking for. And you can certainly address any gaps if they come up, but we don't need to be offering those up as the starting point for the conversation.
Debra, any books or other resources that you would recommend to someone who's in transition?
Yeah, I have a couple things. So shameless plug for myself, follow me on LinkedIn. I offer job search advice several times a week for the executive level, for career roles and board roles. So certainly do that. We also have an executive job search guide that I'd be happy to share with your listeners. If you reach out to me, happy to share that. And then 2 books by friends and colleagues of mine that I think are both really excellent resources. The one is The New Rules for the 6-Figure Job Search by Trish McGrath. And the second one is Find Work Worth Doing, the Handbook for Creating a Meaningful Career by Jason Mutzfeld. They're both found on Amazon. They're both really excellent careers for that executive level looking for a transition.
Debra, we've covered so many great tips and techniques for someone who is looking for that next great opportunity. If our listeners remember 2 things to help them implement and to find that next role, what would be the 3 things that you would ask them to remember?
Such a great question. I think the first thing, and I know we've talked about it a lot, but it's still so incredibly important, is get clear on what your ideal next role looks like. What is success look like for you in that next job? If you're currently working and you don't know what that looks like, I say, what is that? If the perfect opportunity crossed your desk, landed on your desk, whatever might happen, what does it look like? And so that's number 1. Number 2 is don't get hung up, especially at the executive level, don't get hung up on everything you've ever done. Just because you've done things doesn't mean you necessarily want to do them in the future or you want to be known for them. I've done a lot of things in my career. Again, I couldn't really decide what I wanted to be till I was 30. I've done a lot of different things. They're not helping advance my career story. So only focus on the things that really advance your story, and you can let go of the rest of the details, because otherwise you're just going to drive yourself crazy. And the third thing I would say is just remember that the executive job search is different. Don't get sucked into all the advice you see online for job seekers. oh, I saw a job posted, I need to make my resume perfect for this job and apply online. It's going to be a recipe for rejection, and that's not helpful. Don't get sucked into online applications.
Debra Boggs, like I said at the beginning, I knew when we first started talking that this was going to be a great discussion, and you lived up to that. You provided so much wonderful suggestions and ideas for that executive in transition. I really appreciate it. And I know from all of my listeners, they would want me to say thank you for your sharing and caring enough to help them be successful. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Bob. I appreciate it as well. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening. We're working in unprecedented times. The purpose of these episodes is to give you the support and critical tools to adjust with the changing marketplace. I'll continue to introduce you to guests who have successfully survived their own obstacle course and can share useful information. If today's message was helpful to you, please share it on your social media. Your review and rating helps get this to more people. Also, if you have questions or podcast ideas for future conversations, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Change is constant. The more prepared you are for it, the better and easier the change will occur. Thank you again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you at our next episode.